Chapter 968. There was a moment of dead silence. Jun Jiuqing didn't seem to notice the change in the atmosphere at all. He only narrowed his eyes, which were like a pair of crescent moons, emitting specks of red light. Unfortunately, Tai Yu's group was too incompetent. They couldn't even defeat a divine beast, so they fled in a hurry. Chu Liyue's hand slowly loosened, and his palm was sweaty. Mu Hongyu and the rest also heaved sighs of relief without any change in their expressions. Fortunately, you said that the people from Tai Yu dynasty were chased away by a divine beast? The woman seemed to be very surprised, and there was a hint of doubt in her eyes. Jun Jiuqing chuckled. Red-tailed red phoenix, don't you recognize it? The few of them looked over and indeed saw a palm-sized crimson fiend nestled on Shang Guanyu's shoulder. Judging from its size, it seemed to be the legendary red-tailed red phoenix. Yes, there seems to be a rumor saying that that person contracted a divine beast. Another young man couldn't help but mutter softly. The Baiming dynasty and the Tianling dynasty were far apart, and the two sides rarely interacted with each other. However, they would more or less know about the major events that happened in the surrounding dynasties. Especially after knowing that the Crown Prince had personally invited the people from the Tianling dynasty to the ancient Phoenix Mountain this time, they were even more curious and disgusted in private. Among them, the one that was discussed the most was naturally the new Tianling emperor in front of them, Shang Guanyu. After all, everything about her was too amazing. With the help of such a divine beast, it was no wonder that they could defeat the people from Tai Yu dynasty. Hearing this, the woman looked carefully again. Qing Dai, this seems to be the mark left behind by the red-tailed red phoenix. The young man beside her whispered. Qing Dai nodded, but she still frowned, feeling that something was wrong. However, since the Crown Prince had already said so, there was nothing to doubt. Thus, she could only suppress the doubts in her heart. It's just a small matter, Your Highness. Chu Liyue spoke in a very polite tone. He was like a completely different person from before. Jun Jiuqing's smile deepened. Although she was smiling and her attitude was polite, he didn't need to think to know that she was cursing him fiercely in her heart. In front of so many people, there were still many things to consider. Thinking of this, Jun Jiuqing's mood immediately improved. Not at all. I was bored staying on the ancient Phoenix Mountain. Encountering this matter just so happened to relieve my boredom. He was probably the only one here who could say such words so casually. Chu Liyue knew that he was referring to her. She narrowed her eyes dangerously, but in the end, she suppressed her emotions. After these few tests, he was basically sure that there was something wrong with Jun Jiuqing. And it wasn't a small problem. Unless it was absolutely necessary, it was best to avoid contact with such people. She raised her eyebrows slightly and laughed as well. It's good that Your Highness doesn't mind. However, we have important matters to attend to and can't delay any longer. We'll take our leave first. After saying that, she cupped her hands and left with Mu Hongyu and the others. She was straightforward and didn't hesitate at all. Jun Jiuqing snorted softly. How could it be so easy to get rid of him? Qing Dai glanced at Jun Jiuqing from the corner of her eye and was slightly stunned. He was looking at the backs of the few people who were leaving. His expression was as lazy and evil as usual. However, those mesmerizing eyes of his seemed to have a focus at this moment. He was looking at one of the people. Almost instantly, Qing Dai immediately guessed that he was looking at Shang Guanyu. In fact, from the beginning, she had already sensed that the Crown Prince treated that woman very differently. He seemed to have known her for a long time, and his attitude towards her was exceptionally benevolent. If it was someone else who spoke to him like this, he would definitely not have such a reaction. And those who were not pleasing to the eye might be half dead if things didn't go well. However, Shang Guanyu was different. Everyone could tell that although she seemed to be respectful to the Crown Prince, that was not the case. In fact, she even seemed to be avoiding the Crown Prince. However, he didn't seem to care about that at all. In fact, he even indulged her. Moreover, he had never looked at anyone else with that kind of gaze. Qing Dai didn't know how to describe this feeling, but she could clearly feel it. Could it be, Qing Dai, what are you thinking about? Someone beside her asked curiously. She quickly lowered her eyes and hurriedly suppressed her thoughts. She forced a smile. Nothing. I'm just thinking that it's really enviable to be able to contract with a divine beast. The few people beside her didn't notice her abnormality and nodded in agreement. That's right. Even in our Beiming dynasty, it's extremely rare to have a divine beast. This is really due to luck, right? I heard that she was killed by someone. Later on, I don't know how, but she actually came back alive. I don't think the word luck can describe this. I've heard some rumors as well. It seems like she was forced to a dead end by her fiancé and sister. In the end, she chose to kill herself. Speaking of which, it's quite tragic. Are you done? The few of them were discussing in low voices when Jun Jiuqing's cold voice suddenly sounded and interrupted their conversation. When they looked up, Jun Jiuqing was still smiling. However, there seemed to be wind and frost gathering in between his eyebrows, which sent chills down their spines. This was a sign that he was about to get angry. Yes, I'm done. I'm at fault. I shouldn't have said so much. Your Highness, please forgive us. The few of them realized that something was wrong and hurriedly admitted their mistakes. However, Jun Jiuqing's face was still very gloomy. Next time, if I hear these words again, I won't be able to keep your tongues. The few of them did not expect Jun Jiuqing to be so angry all of a sudden. They were a little flustered for a moment. At the same time, they finally realized that Shangguan Yu was not someone to be trifled with. They did not know why His Highness treated her like this. Qing Dai pursed her lips and looked down to hide the sadness in her eyes. Jun Jiuqing looked up at the sky and narrowed his eyes. It's almost time. Chu Luiwei and the rest of them walked for quite a distance. After making sure that they had completely separated from the rest of the people, they finally stopped by a river to rest. First, she roughly treated the wounds on their bodies and distributed some pills to each of them. Fortunately, she had a lot of pills in her universe ring, so it was much more convenient for her. Lu Yu, why do you have so many pills with you? Mu Hongyu swallowed the pills and circulated her force according to the method Chu Luiwei taught her. As expected, she felt much better. She could not help but ask. Although she was a celestial physician, she still had a lot of things with her. Chu Luiwei blinked his eyes and gently rotated the universe ring. A smile bloomed on his lips. Actually, I didn't pack a lot of things. Most of them were prepared by Rong Xiu. Digression, Rong Xiu, a must-have man for home and travel. Please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 969. The cosmic ring that he had given her previously contained almost all kinds of items. There was no lack of precious pills and treasures among them. It was just the right time to use them. Mu Hongyu chuckled. I've long said that King Li treats you differently. Tell me, was it because of you that Prince Li moved to the academy? If he didn't care about her, how could he be so considerate and considerate? Chu Luiwei bent her fingers and lightly knocked her forehead. If you have the time to think about this, why don't you recuperate and recover your strength? That way, we can find Jian Fengqi and little Zhou as soon as possible. At the mention of this, Mu Hongyu and company's expressions became serious. They had been pursued by the people from the Taiyu dynasty, so they didn't know what happened to those two. Lu Yu, we've already crushed our Jin Lingzi. We can't contact them. How's your side? Chu Luiwei rubbed the Jin Lingzi on his wrist as his eyes narrowed. The two of them also crushed their Jin Lingzi after you guys. It's also because of this that I forced my way in. What? The few of them looked at each other and realized the seriousness of the matter. Chu Luiwei looked up and glanced in a certain direction. They should still be there. I don't know how the situation is. Let's rest for a while before rushing over. The two of them are very strong. How could they? Yuan Jinghong frowned, puzzled. Besides, we're in such a sorry state because we've been pursued by the people from the Taiyu dynasty since the beginning. But how could the two of them? Could it be that they encountered the same situation as us? A total of 5 dynasties came in. After some calculations, the only ones who might attack them are probably from the East Com dynasty. Chu Luiwei shook his head. We can't make a conclusion without seeing it with our own eyes. Besides, There might be danger everywhere on ancient Phoenix Mountain. That being said, Chu Luiwei wasn't too optimistic. Needless to say, Xiao Zhou grew up in the southern border, so he should be able to move around freely in a place like this. As for Jian Fengqi, he was lazy and carefree. If he could win a fight, he would fight. If he couldn't, he would run. He was someone who would never allow himself to be in danger. To be able to force the two of them into such a desperate situation, it was probably not an ordinary problem. However, Chu Luiwei did not say this out loud. He just tried his best to let the three of them recover. Mu Hongyu's condition was the best. She only had some superficial wounds, which didn't affect her much. One of Yuan Jinghong's legs was broken. Chu Luiwei helped him reattach it, bandaged it, and fed him medicine. Although his legs were not nimble, he was still in good spirits. The most serious one was Wu Ming. In order to save Mu Hongyu and Yuan Jinghong, he had suffered too many injuries. Among them, the most important was that his spleen was severely ruptured. This directly led to the loss of a piece of the 5 treasures that he had worked so hard to open up, making it difficult to connect the circulation of the force in his body. This was an immeasurable blow to a cultivator. The 5 treasures that he had worked so hard to establish were suddenly missing a part of them. It would have a great impact on his recovery and future cultivation. It was even very likely that he would not be able to move forward. However, Wu Ming himself was very open-minded about this matter. "Thank you, Your Majesty. I'm already very lucky to be able to keep my life. I don't dare to hope for anything else." Chu Luiwei raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at him disapprovingly. "You don't care, but I do. I originally brought you here to let you take the opportunity to improve your strength, not to throw away your lives. If you were to become crippled, wouldn't that be a great loss for me?" Wu Ming knew that she was consoling him and could not help but laugh bitterly. "However, the 5 treasures are bound together for good or ill. How can they be repaired properly?" Chu Luiwei laughed softly. "This body of mine used to have a damaged yuan meridian and was a genuine good-for-nothing. Isn't it fine now? It's not like your 5 treasures are all damaged. It's just a part of them. It's not a big problem." Wu Ming was somewhat skeptical. "Is Your Majesty speaking the truth?" Chu Luiwei looked up slightly. Her dark jade-like eyes were calm and reassuring. That trace of worry in Wu Ming's heart suddenly vanished into thin air. He pursed his lips. "I'll listen to Your Majesty's arrangements." Only then did Chu Luiwei nod in satisfaction. "Rest first. After 2 days, when you've recovered slightly, you can undergo further treatment." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Chu Luiwei smiled. She suddenly thought of something and asked, "Did you 6 days ago? Did you encounter any fortuitous encounters?" They all shook their heads. "Not long after we entered, we were chased by those people from the Taiyu dynasty. We couldn't care less about anything else." Chu Luiwei agreed. When their lives were at stake, how could they care about such things? "But," Yuan Jinghong said hesitantly, "I feel that the density of force on this mountain seems to be much thinner than when we first arrived." "I have the same feeling." Mu Hongyu quickly nodded in agreement. Chu Luiwei was somewhat surprised. "Are you sure?" When she entered, she found that the density of force here was several times higher than outside. How could it be thinner than before? Then how terrifying was it at the very beginning? As if seeing through Chu Luiwei's thoughts, Yuan Jinghong explained. "Actually, it's not that the force has become thinner everywhere. It's... He scratched his head as if he didn't know how to describe it. Then he patted his head and pointed in another direction. "Look over there." Chu Luiwei narrowed her eyes. Yuan Jinghong was referring to the highest and most precipitous mountain here. And the top of the mountain seemed to have been shaved off by something. It was very neat and flat. At this moment, they were still several mountain peaks away from the other side. The main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain? Chu Luiwei knew that that was the real ancient Phoenix Mountain. It was also the place where Dark North Taizu successfully broke through and entered the God Realm. The reason why that mountain was flat was said to be because of that Dark North Taizu's palm. That's it. These few days, all the force seems to be rushing towards that place. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat and she closed her eyes. She used her divine sense to check the surroundings carefully. The vast mountain range was filled with rich force of heaven and earth. At this moment, it seemed to be attracted by some kind of force. It was slowly but surely moving towards that mountain peak. After a moment, she opened her eyes and nodded seriously. That's right. The force of heaven and earth is indeed rushing towards that place. If I'm not wrong, 3 elements as one will appear on that mountain peak in 9 days. That's right. I almost forgot about that. Yuan Jinghong laughed a little embarrassedly. Mu Hongyu looked around and hesitantly asked, "What's wrong?" "Lu Yu, that's the opposite direction from where Jian Fengqi and the others are. Which direction should we go first?" Chu Luiyue said without hesitation. "Let's find them first." Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 970. Ancient Phoenix Mountain's main peak was 3 essences as one. When the time came, the closer they were, the more benefits they would receive. If they were lucky enough, they would be able to receive an endless amount of force and break through directly. Of course, the most important point was that the secret of the northern underworld Taizu entering the divine realm was very likely to be hidden on that main peak. Even if they were able to get a glimpse of it, it would be extremely beneficial. Which cultivator in the world would not want to reach a higher level? This was undoubtedly a huge temptation. However, Chu Luiyue still chose to look for Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou without hesitation. Mu Hongyu knew her the best. When they were in the academy, they had experienced life and death together. Hence, she was not surprised to see her make such a decision. She only nodded vigorously. However, Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming were still a little surprised. If it were someone else, they might not have made such a choice. After all, ancient Phoenix Mountain only opened once every 1,000 years. Such an opportunity was truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. However, she still made such a choice. It was impossible to say that they were not touched. However, Chu Luiyue did not seem to care much about this. She only treated it as an ordinary choice. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming looked at each other and saw the surging emotions in each other's eyes. However, the two of them did not say anything and tacitly quieted down. After resting for a while, Chu Luiyue stood up. "Dumpling!" Swoosh! With the sound of wings flapping, Dumpling quickly returned to its original size from a small bird. Chu Luiyue took the lead and jumped up, then called for the other 3 to follow. When all of them were standing on Dumpling's back, Chu Luiyue patted Dumpling's head lightly. "Let's go!" Dumpling flapped its wings and rose up. It quickly flew forward. The red figure streaked across the sky like a burning line of fire, quickly spreading into the distance. About an hour later, Chu Luiyue felt that Jean Lingzi's special aura was getting stronger. Her expression turned cold. They were almost there. She looked down and saw that there was a rugged canyon between the 2 mountains. There were 2 familiar figures in the canyon. Her heart stirred slightly. Screech! Dumpling let out a clear cry and quickly swooped down. But when they were about to reach the bottom, they suddenly encountered an invisible resistance. Dumpling's speed had obviously slowed down. "Evacuate quickly. There's something strange about this space." Mu Hongyu suddenly spoke. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming looked confused. "What's strange?" Mu Hongyu pointed downwards with a serious expression. "The space of this inverted canyon seems to have been disturbed by some kind of power and has become somewhat chaotic." "Chaos?" Yuan Jinghong took a closer look. The mountains rose and fell, and the peaks were beautiful. Occasionally, a breeze would blow past, rustling the forest. This doesn't seem to be a problem. However, Chu Luiyue knitted her brows slightly and said, "That's right. Dumpling, retreat." Dumpling heard this and immediately flapped its wings and quickly flew upwards. Soon, the invisible resistance disappeared. Dumpling circled above the canyon. Chu Luiyue confirmed something and turned to look at Mu Hongyu. "Hongyu, you said that this space is chaotic. What do you mean?" Mu Hongyu's eyes widened. "Didn't you notice that the power of space here is different?" A dark light flashed in Chu Luiyue's eyes. She only vaguely felt that something was wrong, but her feeling was not as clear as Mu Hongyu's. Suddenly, her expression changed slightly. "You have the faint Yuan body, and your control of space is far superior to ordinary people. This is probably why you can feel this. Mu Hongyu was stunned. Is that so? Ever since she knew that she had the faint Yuan body, her biggest understanding of herself was that she could teleport. In her mind, the stronger her strength, the further the distance she could teleport. She was not too sure about other things. At this moment, if not for Chu Luiyue pointing it out, she would not have realized that she had such a characteristic. She had always thought that everyone was about the same. That's right. It should be because your strength has increased a lot now, so your sensitivity to space has also increased. That's why you can clearly feel the abnormality in that space. Chu Luiyue nodded affirmatively. When the other two heard this, they suddenly understood and expressed their agreement. Among these people, only Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu had not broken through to become rank 7 warriors. However, Mu Hongyu's talent and advantage in this area were obviously far superior to others. What else did you feel? Tell me in detail. Chu Luiyue said as she looked down with a serious expression. When they approached earlier, she had already confirmed their identities. Logically speaking, when they flew down, they made quite a bit of noise, so the two of them should have noticed it. But until now, the two of them had not even raised their heads. This made Chu Luiyue quite worried. Upon hearing that, Mu Hongyu nodded and pointed at the canyon below. Let's make an analogy. Where we are now, the space is stable, like a piece of paper that has been evenly dyed with a color. But down there, it's filled with different spatial powers, intertwining and entangling with each other. It's the same piece of paper, but it's a mess of colors. As she spoke, she pointed to different positions. There, it's a single piece. Beside it, there are two small spaces squeezing each other. As for the other side, although it's a complete space, it's different from the others. Even though Chu Luiyue and the rest couldn't sense it completely like Mu Hongyu, they could understand a little from her description. So, just this canyon alone is filled with at least 6 to 7 different spatial powers? Yuan Jinghong asked in surprise. Mu Hongyu touched her chin. You can say that, but the actual situation is even more troublesome than this. Because these different spaces will squeeze and compete with each other, making the atmosphere of this entire space even worse. If we go in now, it will definitely be very dangerous. Then Feng Qi and the other two, the two of them were right below. But at this moment, they seem to be sitting cross-legged on the ground with a distance between them. I don't know what they're doing. So they're in a critical situation now. They're probably trapped there and can't get out. As Mu Hongyu spoke, she looked at Chu Luiyue. Luyu, what do you think we should do next? Chu Luiyue stared at the scene below and fell into deep thought. Even though she couldn't sense it as clearly as Mu Hongyu, from the resistance just now, it was indeed harder to deal with than expected. To be able to stop Dumpling, it was enough to imagine how terrifying the power contained in this intertwining space was. At this moment, a sharp whistle was suddenly blown, rising with the wind. It was Chang Wanzhou blowing the whistle that Yu Qisong gave the two of them back then. He's asking for help. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 971. He must have encountered an even more dangerous situation. Chu Luiyue frowned and looked over. Chang Wanzhou was blowing his whistle as he struggled to stand up and walk forward. He seemed to want to leave the canyon. But just as he took a step, his legs went weak and he fell to the ground. He didn't move. Only the whistle lingered in the sky for a long time. It couldn't be dismissed. A vibration came, and Chu Luiyue took out his whistle. It responded automatically, and it resonated strongly with the whistle on Chang Wanzhou's body. At this moment, Chu Luiyue suddenly realized that Chang Wanzhou was on the verge of death. Jian Fengqi, who was not far away, was probably not any better. He had to go down and save them immediately. Chu Luiyue made a prompt decision. He held the whistle tightly in his hand and looked up at them. You guys stay here. I'll go down and bring them back. No! The few of them spoke out in unison and objected. Your Majesty, this place is dangerous. How can you put yourself in danger? Wu Ming frowned. That's right. Even if someone has to go, it has to be me. Yuan Jinghong patted his chest. Don't worry, I've almost recovered. It's best if I go. Which one of you can compare to the faint Yuan body? Mu Hongyu directly used her killer move. No one knows better than me what to do after going down, right? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming fell silent. In terms of this point alone, they really couldn't compare to Mu Hongyu. But your current strength is not even that of a rank 7 warrior. Mu Hongyu's face darkened for a moment. The two of you are in a high realm, but do you believe that I can take care of the two of you right now? The two of them choked. Chu Luiwei patted Mu Hongyu's shoulder lightly. Let's go down together. Whether it was her or Mu Hongyu, the chances of winning were not high if they went down alone. It was best to work together and complement each other. Mu Hongyu thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Okay. Seeing that the two people with the highest combat strength had already made their decision, the remaining two had no choice but to acquiesce. Dumpling, stay here and protect the two of them. Chu Luiwei seriously. Your Majesty, how can we do that? This time, the two of them were unwilling. This canyon was extremely dangerous, and it was already very dangerous for them to go down. If he could bring along the red-tailed red phoenix, he would at least have some confidence. How could he stay behind to protect them? Chu Luiwei glanced at them. This consort has just saved all of you. This consort doesn't want this time and energy to go to waste. But if there's no divine beast, you and Hongyu. Yuan Jinghong's face flushed red, and she was really ashamed. An idea popped up in Chu Luiwei's mind, and a golden light rapidly enveloped her entire body. In the blink of an eye, it formed a golden armor. Pure gold armor? Wu Ming muttered absent-mindedly. Wasn't it rumored that this pure gold armor was damaged when Shangguan Wan went to Dahuang Swamp? How did it appear on Her Highness' body in perfect condition? Chu Luiwei's lips curled up. Who said that I'm going alone? The few of them were all stunned. The next moment, they saw Chu Luiwei snap her fingers. The legendary three-eyed eagle. Whoosh! With the sound of a hurricane, a huge black figure appeared in front of them. It was a huge black eagle. When it spread its wings, it almost covered the sky. Its whole body was emitting a bone-chilling coldness. And there was a vertical eye on its forehead. Its eyes were cold, fierce, and disdainful. The suppressive aura around it was almost suffocating. God! Yuan Jinghong's face was full of shock. She pointed at the huge creature that suddenly appeared, her fingers trembling. Divine beast! Wu Ming's heart was also filled with shock because he recognized this divine beast. The legendary three-eyed eagle? This was an existence that was not inferior to the red-tailed phoenix. Her Highness summoned such a divine beast. How did she do it? Chu Luiwei leaped and landed on the back of the legendary three-eyed eagle. Hongyu, come here. Mu Hongyu was also stunned. When she heard this, she came back to her senses and hurriedly rushed over. But even when she stood on the back of the legendary three-eyed eagle, she was still confused. The legendary three-eyed eagle, divine beast? With it you should be relieved. Its speed is not inferior to dumplings. It's even faster. The legendary three-eyed eagles were originally fierce and aggressive, and their attack power was extremely strong. If they really fought, it was hard to tell who would win. No, this divine beast. What's going on? Yuan Jinghong stuttered. This was actually what Mu Hongyu and Wu Ming wanted to ask. Chu Luiwei laughed. Oh, I forgot to introduce. This is my contracted beast, the legendary three-eyed eagle. Contracted beast? Yuan Jinghong's voice suddenly rose. She turned to look at Dumpling in shock. Then what is it? Chu Luiwei said casually. It's also mine. It's also mine. It's also mine? Looking at the few of them doubting their lives, Chu Luiwei tilted her head. I don't think I've said that I only contracted one divine beast, right? As soon as she finished speaking, there was a dead silence. Wu Ming's eyes were dull. Mu Hongyu's body stiffened. Yuan Jinghong's mouth twitched violently. Only contracted one divine beast. Listen to that. Is this something a human would say? Digression, con sob. 6:00 mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 972. Wu Ming came back to his senses, his face full of envy and admiration. Your Majesty is indeed a genius. For ordinary people, they might not even be able to see a divine beast in their lifetime, let alone form a contract with one. In the entire history of the Tianling dynasty, there were no more than 3 people who had formed a contract with a divine beast. And Chu Luiyue was not enough. There was a second one. No one would dare to believe it. Yuan Jinghong rubbed his face hard. After confirming that what he saw was real, he felt very conflicted. In the past, she had the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, and was a rare genius in the entire Tianling dynasty. Because of her existence, countless geniuses were overshadowed. Yuan Jinghong was one of them. After being defeated so many times, he accepted his fate. Some people were born stronger than you, and they were so strong that you couldn't even feel jealous of them. Who could cross the chasm that was as wide as heaven and earth? It was better to give up. Later, she was assassinated and raped to death. She changed her body and identity and started all over again. This time, it was not the Tianjing Yuan Meridian, right? This time, it was not the top-notch training she had received since she was young, right? This time, she could surpass him, even if it was just a little bit, right? When Yuan Jinghong found out that his realm was much higher than hers, he was happy for a few days. Although he knew that she would surpass him in the future, he still wanted to enjoy these happy days as much as possible. But until now, Yuan Jinghong sadly discovered that he had not surpassed her for even a day. She had formed a contract with a divine beast from the beginning. And there were 2 of them. What about him? If Dumpling had not been left behind to protect them this time, he would not even be able to touch a divine beast's fur. He stared at Chu Luiyue and finally could not help but say faintly, "Your Majesty, you'd better leave quickly." It was really too exciting to just casually walk around with 2 divine beasts in front of them. Chu Luiyue saw his expression and knew what he was thinking. She could not help but laugh. Although Yuan Jinghong was not as competitive as Jian Fengqi, she was still a little bit competitive. It seemed like he had suffered quite a blow this time. "Jinghong, I'll leave Wu Ming to you." Upon hearing this, Yuan Jinghong immediately perked up. "Rest assured, Your Majesty." A smile flashed across Chu Luiyue's eyes as he turned to look at the valley below. "Go." The legendary 3-eyed eagle flapped its wings, stirring up a gust of wind. The black silhouette instantly transformed into a black arrow, shooting straight ahead. A little to the left, yes, a little to the left, a little to the front. The legendary 3-eyed eagle led the 2 of them all the way down. Mu Hongyu continued to give guidance, choosing the easiest path for them to enter. Chu Luiyue could clearly feel that the lower he went, the greater the resistance he encountered. However, with the help of Mu Hongyu, they did avoid most of the spatial turbulence. Although nothing could be seen with the naked eye, the pressure between the various spaces was getting stronger and stronger. There were several times in the middle that Chu Luiyue felt as if there was an invisible vortex around them that wanted to drag them away. Fortunately, they avoided it one by one. They were getting closer and closer to the 2 of them. 10 feet ahead, turn right, and continue forward, yes. Mu Hongyu stared at them with rapt attention, not daring to slack off for even a moment. I really don't know why this place is so strange. It was not that she had never been to a place with chaotic space, but this was the first time she had seen such a chaotic and extremely threatening place. The slightest carelessness could lead to a great loss. Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou must be trapped here because of this and could not get out. Why would such a strange place appear in this ancient Phoenix Mountain? I don't know how it was caused. Mu Hongyu was puzzled. Chu Luiyue was also thinking in his heart. 1,000 years ago, the northern underworld Taizu broke through that layer of shackles and successfully stepped into a higher realm. Logically speaking, this ancient Phoenix Mountain, as well as the surrounding mountain ranges, should be enveloped by the same power. But this was not the case. However, Chu Luiyue did not have much time to think about this problem. The most important thing now was to save the 2 of them first. "Little Zhou." As the distance was getting closer and closer, Chu Luiyue shouted in that direction. Chang Wanzhou fell to the ground, motionless, as if he had fainted. At this moment, Mu Hongyu's voice became nervous. "Lu Yu, the situation is not good." The spatial turbulence below is much more complicated and terrifying than above. You must not get close easily. Almost at the same time, several invisible waves surged over. Screech, the legendary three-eyed eagle flapped its wings, and several icicles flew out quickly. Thud thud thud. On the ground, a row of icicles instantly stood up. There were also messy cracks spreading out below. But the rebound force was not to be underestimated. Chu Liwei could clearly feel that the surrounding space seemed to be shrinking toward the center, and his entire body was unbearably heavy. The legendary three-eyed eagle's body is too big. It's too easy to be attacked here. Mu Hongyu furrowed her brows. Chu Liyue's mind raced, and he raised his foot to jump down directly. Mu Hongyu pulled him back and asked nervously, "What are you doing?" "Go down and save him." Chu Liyue's words were concise and comprehensive. Mu Hongyu had explained very clearly just now. This space close to the ground was definitely not suitable for the legendary three-eyed eagle to go down. Relatively speaking, her figure was slender, and it was much more convenient. No. The spatial power below is already chaotic, and it has almost become a meat grinder. That's precisely why we have to go. Chu Liwei broke free from her hand, jumped, and went straight in the direction of Chang Wanzhou. Lu Yu, just as Mu Hongyu was filled with worry, a terrifying wave suddenly came from the side. Her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately turned to look. Jian Fengqi was sitting cross-legged on the ground, his eyes closed, and his face pale. She did not know what he was going through. His brows were tightly knitted, and his originally handsome face was full of pain. An invisible force was slowly but firmly surging toward his chest. Upon closer inspection, one could see a trace of faintly discernible black at the edge of the force. That was the sign of a spatial crack. Mu Hongyu did not hesitate and rushed over directly. On the surface, this place looked calm and peaceful. But in reality, one could only sense the strangeness of this space when one was in it. There seemed to be all kinds of forces approaching from all directions. They wanted to tear people apart. Chu Liwei moved in it, sometimes fast and sometimes slow, all caused by these different spatial forces. But fortunately, the pure gold sacred armor helped her to resist most of the attacks. Just like that, she approached step by step. At this moment, Chang Wanzhou seemed to have regained some consciousness, and his fingers moved slightly. Then he slowly propped himself up and raised his head to look ahead. In his blurred vision, a figure appeared. He was stunned, and then a huge surprise and disbelief suddenly surged in his eyes. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 973. His voice was very weak. Other than himself, no one else could hear it. But that wasn't important. What was important was the person in front of him. Chang Wanzhou couldn't believe it. He quickly closed his eyes, trying to see more clearly. At this moment, the person had already walked up to him. She reached out her hand. "Little Zhou, are you okay?" He had heard this voice many years ago, but it had been too long. It didn't even sound again in his dreams. Chang Wanzhou felt a warm current between his chest and abdomen. His heart beat violently, and the vibrations made his eardrums hurt. He reached out his hand almost subconsciously with a hint of urgency. It was cold and soft to the touch, but there was some kind of great strength in it. Chang Wanzhou's eyes were sore, and the scene in front of him became even more blurry. He closed his eyes tightly again. This time, everything was finally clear. He was almost holding that hand tightly, as if he was afraid that she would leave silently again. However, just as he was about to say something, a familiar face came into view. Chu Liwei. Oh no, it was Sheng Guanyu. Chang Wanzhou's movements suddenly froze. Chu Liwei looked at him strangely. He seemed to have just gone through a big battle. His body was covered in blood, and his face was pale and haggard. His fair and almost transparent face was smeared with dust and blood, and he looked a little embarrassed. And his overly beautiful eyes were stained with a little scarlet. She clearly saw that his eyes were filled with great joy just now. It was like a traveler walking in the desert finally seeing an oasis, or a person crawling in the darkness finally seeing light. However, it was just for a moment. The oasis dried up and the light disappeared. The bright light in his eyes instantly dimmed. His expression looked. Something was not right. "Little Zhou!" Chu Luiwei called out again. This time, Chang Wenzhou finally came back to his senses. He quickly retracted his expression and turned back into the silent young man who was enduring silently. A vague guess surfaced in Chu Luiwei's heart. Could it be that Chang Wenzhou mistook her for someone else? The only person who could make him like this was probably that person, right? She sighed inwardly, but did not pursue the matter. "Don't worry, I'll take you back," she said seriously. Chang Wenzhou's heart seemed to be touched by something. He raised his eyes and looked at her deeply. Chu Luiwei checked his pulse while he was at it. He discovered that the origin power in his body was almost completely depleted, and his internal injuries were also very serious. She was shocked. "How did you get this injury?" Chang Wenzhou frowned. "It's here." Chu Luiwei looked around. Other than the dangerous spatial turbulence, there didn't seem to be anything else here on the surface. He looked like he only had a few external injuries, but the internal injuries were much more serious than those external injuries. This was truly abnormal. "No matter what, let's leave this place first." With that, Chu Luiwei was about to bring him back. However, as soon as she turned around, she discovered that a transparent barrier formed by water suddenly appeared in front of her. Chu Luiwei was stunned. She remembered that there was no such thing when she first came here. All kinds of spatial energy surged in from the surroundings, and ripples appeared on the barrier. Chu Luiwei suddenly had an ominous premonition, and subconsciously took a step back. "Little Zhou, it's dangerous here." As she spoke, she looked back, only to find that Chang Wenzhou's figure had disappeared. In his place was the same transparent barrier. "Little Zhou!" No one responded. Chu Luiwei looked around and found that the transparent barrier had formed a sphere, completely trapping her in it. "Red fish. Jian Fengqi." There was still no response. The most terrifying thing was that Chu Luiwei actually heard the echo of her voice. Her heart suddenly sank. She was completely trapped here. Chu Luiwei took a deep breath, calmed herself down, and calmly observed the situation around her. This transparent barrier, which seemed to be formed by water waves, was not big. She stood in the middle, and after taking 3 to 5 steps forward, she reached the end. She raised her eyes and looked forward. If she remembered correctly, Jian Fengqi was there just now. However, his figure had completely disappeared at this time. As for the transparent barrier, it gradually turned black in this short period of time. Finally, the surroundings fell into darkness. Silence. Chu Luiwei could clearly hear the sound of her breathing and the beating of her heart. She took a deep breath and took out a pearl to light it up. However, after taking it out, there seemed to be an invisible pressure around her. It slowly compressed the fist-sized pearl. Chu Luiwei immediately threw the pearl out. The moment it left her palm, the pearl was instantly squeezed by a strong force and instantly turned into powder. Chu Luiwei could even feel the terrifying heavy pressure on her fingertips. She immediately gave up on this idea and stood quietly in the darkness. That strange force gradually approached and then retreated bit by bit. If not for the dull pain on her fingertips, she would almost think that everything just now was an illusion. Chu Luiwei held her breath and began to think of a way to get out. However, soon, a spot of light appeared in front of her eyes. It was like a star in the dark night, bright and bright. Chu Luiwei looked at it. Soon after, a second star appeared beside the first star, and then a third one. At this time, she realized that this light did not come from the void, but from the barrier. These light spots were of different colors, and they emitted a lustrous glow as they pieced together bit by bit. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly and looked at everything that was happening in front of her seriously. Gradually, she realized that these light spots seemed to be slowly forming a picture. She vaguely saw that it seemed to be a cliff. This cliff was extremely familiar. Chu Luiwei suddenly thought of something, and her expression changed slightly. Then, an octagonal pavilion appeared on the cliff. It was indeed the mysterious cliff that had appeared too many times before. Chu Luiyue unconsciously clenched her hands, and her whole body tensed up. She faintly had a premonition that this scene should be her memory too. Above the octagonal pavilion, light gathered, and a figure appeared. It was the back of a man. However, at this time he was sitting there, and there was a chessboard in front of him, as if he was playing chess. Opposite him, a second figure quickly appeared. It was obviously a woman, with an exquisite figure, and her black hair was like clouds. However, her face was covered by the man's figure, and it was difficult to see. However, when Chu Luiyue looked at the woman's figure, her heart inexplicably started to beat faster. An extremely familiar feeling welled up in her heart. At this time, the woman tilted her head and smiled brightly. "When I go back this time, I'll tell father about us being together, okay?" That beautiful and smiling face was Sheng Guanyu. Digression, you have to ask if I've added more. Today, obviously, a February with a pot lid on its head quickly fled the scene. Mobile users, please browse and read, a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 974. The man sitting opposite Sheng Guanyu chuckled softly and dotingly. "All right." Chu Luiyue's eyes suddenly widened. That voice couldn't be more familiar. She clenched her fists tightly and stared at the scene in front of her. The woman in the octagonal pavilion rested her chin on her hand and smiled as she picked up a chess piece from the jar and placed it on the chessboard. Then she looked up and blinked her long eyelashes. Her dark jade-like eyes were sparkling and bright. "Rong Xiu, you've lost." "Rong Xiu, Rong Xiu." It's really him. The absurd and bold guess in her heart had been confirmed at this moment. Chu Luiyue felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her mind went blank, and even her heart skipped a beat. All the blood in her body seemed to have frozen at this moment. That sentence kept echoing in her ears. "Rong Xiu, you've lost." That was what she had said to Rong Xiu before. They had known each other for a long time. No wonder she felt that this man was so familiar. Chu Luiyue held her breath and stared at the scene in front of her without blinking, afraid that she would miss anything. However, at this moment, the light quickly dimmed, and the entire scene disappeared. Chu Luiyue immediately panicked. She subconsciously stretched out her hand, wanting to retain the scene. However, there was nothing in her hand. Other than the slowly flowing spatial energy, there was nothing else. It was as if everything that had just happened was just an illusion. But it wasn't. Chu Luiyue knew very well that it was definitely not an illusion. That was a memory that belonged to her. The surroundings once again fell into darkness and silence. Chu Luiyue stood on the spot in a daze, but her mind was in a mess. The scene just now kept replaying in front of her eyes. Countless questions poured out crazily. She had once been to that cliff and played chess with Rong Xiu in the octagonal pavilion. Most importantly, at that time, she was already with Rong Xiu. If all of this was true, then it could be explained that she had lost her memory. But what about Rong Xiu? Did he remember all this? Chu Luiyue suddenly remembered the day she was reborn. She woke up in the deserted forest and dealt with the people who wanted to kill the original owner. Then she walked to a lake. Then she met Rong Xiu. At that time, she didn't know the other party's identity. She only felt that this person was extremely strong and not to be trifled with. However, he was very courteous to her. At that time, she was full of vigilance and did not pay attention to these details. However, now that he thought about it, he seemed to have been overly polite and even. There was some kind of intimacy. Later on, he came out to help her several times and secretly helped her. Rong Xiu had never been such a busybody. But she had always been an exception. Chu Luiyue had asked more than once why it was her. There were so many women in the world who flocked to him. Why did he keep chasing after her? She thought that he had chosen her from the moment they met in the forest. But it turned out that everything between them was even earlier than she knew. Chu Luiyue's body trembled slightly. If that's the case, Rong Xiu already knew who she was? What's more, he had been waiting for her there. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain in her mind. Chu Luiyue cried out in pain and hugged her head in pain. She squatted down. It was as if there were sharp needles constantly stabbing into her head. It was extremely painful. Chu Luiyue forced herself to stop thinking and gasped for breath. After a while, the terrible pain gradually disappeared. Chu Luiyue was almost drenched in cold sweat. She closed her eyes and sat on the ground. Her body was a little cold, but she did not care too much. Because at this moment, her mind was filled with what had just happened. She no longer tried to force herself to remember anything. That would only give her a headache. But what had just happened was enough for her to ponder for a long time. She held her head and looked at the endless darkness in front of her in a daze. So, they had already known each other and fallen in love. She had even promised Rong Xiu that she would tell her father about them when she returned. That means he wants to form a marriage contract. Although she did not remember what had happened, she knew that she must have made the decision to spend the rest of her life with Rong Xiu if she could say such words. So, why didn't she remember this part of her memory? She didn't even know that she had forgotten so many important things. Chu Luiyue could not help but laugh at herself, but the tip of her nose was a little sour. Rong Xiu, he should remember everything, right? Otherwise, why would he take care of a strange girl so much? Otherwise, why would he insist on being with her? Otherwise, why would he be willing to kneel down just to ask for a marriage contract with her? Countless scenes alternated, and it was extremely chaotic. But among them, there was one point that was incomparably clear. From the beginning until now, Rong Xiu had always treated her well. Whatever he had done, it was all for her. Or rather, it was to be with her. Chu Luiyue's fingertips moved and touched the universe ring on her hand. She suddenly remembered that rainy night, Rong Xiu's figure standing in front of the Chu family's bluestone street. So lonely and cold. He walked over, took her into his arms, and held an umbrella for her. He said, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes, and hot tears fell silently from the corners of her eyes. Rong Xiu, how long have I made you wait? The surroundings became colder and colder. Chu Luiyue unconsciously curled up, but it was still difficult to resist the cold aura, which was pouring into her body from all directions. She hugged her knees and buried her head in her arms. The breath she exhaled seemed to have become much colder. Girl, girl. A faintly discernible shout seemed to come from a faraway place and fell into his ears. Chu Luiyue moved and slowly opened her eyes. Her surroundings were still pitch black, but the voice was much clearer. Girl, you're finally awake. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Taizu? Phew. Fortunately, you woke up in time. If you were a little later, I'm afraid you would have fallen into a coma. Taizu was incomparably nervous, and there was a trace of lingering fear in his voice. Girl, what happened to you just now? I called for you for a long time, but you didn't respond. Chu Luiyue forcefully closed her eyes and wanted to get up, but she found that her body was extremely stiff and she couldn't move at all. The most important thing was that the force in her body had unknowingly consumed a lot. At this moment, just as she was about to move, she felt an inexplicable weakness in her body. What's going on? Chu Luiyue came back to her senses, and her brows were tightly knitted. Her entire body was tense and alert. This space is very strange. Just now, it seemed to have inexplicably made you fall asleep. At the same time, the force in your body is crazily spreading in all directions. I can't stop it. If it was a little later, I'm afraid. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. She had to get out of here as soon as possible. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 975. She glanced at the location where the images had appeared. It was pitch black, as if nothing had happened. Other than her, no one knew what kind of shocking secret had appeared here. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and cleared her mind of all distracting thoughts. There's no point in staying here. If I want to know everything, the best way is to ask Rong Xiu personally. Sush. Chu Luiyue summoned the Dragon Abyss sword and gripped the hilt tightly. At the same time, she activated the force in her body. However, when she did this, she realized that the force in her body was dissipating worse than she had expected. The yuan meridians in her body were like rivers. Under normal circumstances, these rivers would be abundant. However, at this moment, most of them had dried up. Chu Luiwei was a little frightened. If not for Taizu, she would have been in real danger. Something is indeed wrong here. As Chu Luiwei spoke, she suddenly froze. She seemed to understand why Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou had been sitting in their original spots and doing nothing, but had sent out distress signals. She had not had time to go to Jian Fengqi, but Chang Wanzhou's side did not have many external injuries. However, their internal injuries were extremely serious, and the force in their bodies had been greatly depleted. Perhaps, they had encountered the same situation as her. This strange space had used some kind of method to replay the memories of the people trapped here. It had also quietly lured them into a coma and used this opportunity to devour their force. Taizu, do you know how long we have been here? Chu Lu asked. I'm not too sure. The spatial energy here is different from the outside world, and the flow rate is also different. Therefore, it's hard to determine how long has passed outside. Taizu sighed awkwardly. Chu Luiwei nodded. Actually, this was within her expectations. Now, she could only hope that Mu Hongyu and the others were still doing well. And she had to leave this place first. The water droplet in her dantian slowly rotated, and streams of force surged out, quickly flowing towards Chu Luiwei's limbs and bones. Very soon, the missing energy in her body was completely replenished, and she was full again. If it was anyone else, they would basically be in the same situation as Chang Wanzhou. However, Chu Luiwei was different. The water droplet in her body had devoured too much force. With her current level, it was basically an inexhaustible supply. Two streams of flames surged out of the Dragon Abyss sword. One red and one transparent. This light quickly lit up the surroundings. The invisible force seemed to have sensed the threat and began to rapidly close in. Chu Luiwei's body could clearly feel the pressure coming from all directions. His chest felt heavy, and he almost couldn't breathe. Even the flow of origin power in his body had slowed down. She clenched her teeth and poured her vigorous force into the Dragon Abyss sword. Then, he gripped the hilt of the sword with both hands and raised it high. It hacked down fiercely. Chang Wanzhou had intended to return with Chu Luiwei. However, as soon as she turned around, her figure disappeared. The surroundings were empty. There was nothing. Chang Wanzhou frowned. He knew that he had fallen into the same predicament as before. The day before, when he and Jian Fengqi came here, they had also encountered the same situation. Then, the two of them separated and lost contact with each other. After that, he fell into a coma. He knew that his situation was very dangerous. Relying on his last bit of rationality, he crushed the Jin Lingzi and blew the whistle. Fortunately, she had really come. However, not long after, the same thing happened again. Soon, Chang Wanzhou was shrouded in darkness again. Young Lord? Young Lord? Jian Fengqi? Wake up. An anxious and worried voice entered his ears. Jian Fengqi gradually regained consciousness. Then, he opened his eyes with great difficulty. Don't shout. I can hear you. Jian Fengqi opened his mouth. Only then did he realize that his voice was very weak and a little hoarse. Thinking of the previous incident, his eyes darkened. Then, he turned his gaze and saw Mu Hongyu in front of him. Young Lord, you're finally awake. Mu Hongyu's nervous and worried expression disappeared. She heaved a sigh of relief and patted her chest. Seeing her like this, Jian Fengqi felt as if his heart was gently poked by something. His gloomy mood instantly dissipated. Instead, there was an indescribable feeling surging in his chest. What are you nervous about? I'm very lucky. He coughed again. However, he had recovered some of his strength. Mu Hongyu nodded seriously. That's good, that's good. If you didn't wake up, I was going to try and see if I could wake you up. She had already moved her wrist. The corner of Jian Fengqi's eyes twitched. There's really no need. It wasn't that he didn't know Mu Hongyu's strength. If he slapped her, Jian Fengqi was suddenly very glad that he woke up in time. Otherwise, this face. Suddenly he paused. His eyebrows furrowed as he looked at Mu Hongyu. Wait, why are you here? He remembered that he and Chang Wanzhou had separated not long after entering this canyon. After that, he realized that something was very wrong here. He directly crushed Jean Lingzi. He wanted to get out as soon as possible. However, he didn't know why, but he fainted until Mu Hongyu arrived. "We're here to save you, of course." "You?" Jian Fengqi looked around. They were still in the canyon. However, other than the two of them, there was no one else. "Lu Yu," Mu Hongyu said and sighed. "It's a pity that we're trapped here now. We don't know what's going on outside and we don't know if they're safe now." Jian Fengqi almost suspected that he had heard wrong. He couldn't help but ask, "Who did you say?" Mu Hongyu saw his puzzled face and simply explained the cause and effect of the matter. After listening, Jian Fengqi's expression was dull for a long time. Chu Liwei forcefully split open the barrier of ancient Phoenix Mountain and came in. After saving Mu Hongyu and the others, he came here and even summoned a second mythological beast to fly down and save them. How long had it been? How could so many things happen? Mu Hongyu didn't really care about his reaction and she only said, "Young master, we have to get out of here quickly. Otherwise, with your current situation, it will only be worse if you continue to stay here." Jian Fengqi nodded. Of course, he was very clear about this. However, how do we get out? The spatial turbulence here was very chaotic and terrifying. Every time he thought he was going to get out, he would be beaten back. Mu Hongyu patted her chest, her almond-shaped eyes curved. "Have you forgotten that I have a faint yuan body? Leave it to me." With that, she stood up and stretched out her hand to Jian Fengqi to help him up. Then she said, "Hold me tight." Jian Fengqi's heart suddenly jumped. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 976. Mu Hongyu waited for a while and realized that Jian Fengqi did not move. She looked up at him strangely. "What's wrong?" The girl in front of him had bright almond-shaped eyes and a pretty face. She was standing in front of him, so close that he could see her long eyelashes. Jian Fengqi exchanged glances with her, and his heart beat faster for some reason. He almost looked away awkwardly. Hugging doesn't seem to be appropriate. If these words were heard by outsiders, they would probably laugh their heads off on the spot. Jian Fengqi, who had always been a playboy, actually said something like, "inappropriate," to a girl. It was simply touching. However, although Mu Hongyu had heard some rumors about Jian Fengqi, she was not a native of West Hill. Moreover, she had spent most of her short months in West Hill on Dragon Teeth Mountain. What kind of place was Dragon Teeth Mountain? It was Jian Fengqi's home. Who dared to say anything bad about the young master? Therefore, she did not know much about Jian Fengqi. Mu Hongyu blinked. "What's inappropriate about it? You even saved me before. Shouldn't I find a way to get you out of here? We are all friends, so of course we should help each other." Thinking about how Lu Yu was willing to risk his life for them, this was nothing. Thinking of this, she took a step forward. The distance between the two of them instantly shortened. The heat and fragrance from her body assailed his nostrils and filled his body in an instant. Jian Fengqi opened his mouth, but did not know what to say. His whole body stiffened. Mu Hongyu did not notice his abnormality. She grabbed his hand and placed it on her waist. The girl's slender and soft waist seemed to be on fire. The moment he touched her, his palm felt hot. A wave of heat surged up, and Jian Fengqi's jade-like face instantly turned crimson. Even his ears felt like they were on fire. With a red face, he almost instinctively hugged her waist tightly. But he did not dare to get too close. He was afraid that he would burn himself. "Hold on tight." Mu Hongyu shouted softly and closed her eyes. The next moment, the power of the space around her suddenly started to surge outwards. Jian Fengqi could clearly feel that the forces that had been suppressing them earlier were rapidly moving away. Then, with a flash of black light, they disappeared on the spot. Boom! The long yuan sword slashed down fiercely and landed on the black barrier. There was a loud boom. The two forces madly collided, producing terrifying and crazy energy waves. The surrounding invisible forces started to churn wildly. Like sharp knives, they were cutting everywhere. One of them went straight for Chu Liuyue's neck. At this point, a bright light appeared from Chu Liuyue's body. The pure gold armor appeared once again. Ding, 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 ding. Crisp sounds from all parts of his body. Fortunately, these attacks were nothing compared to the defense of the pure gold armor. The only pity was that when the long yuan sword landed, although the black barrier was impacted, it did not seem to have any intention of breaking. At this moment, Taizu's voice could be heard. This barrier is protected by divine power. Based on your current strength, it will be difficult to break it open. Let me give you a hand. With that, Chu Luiwei felt the aura of the long yuan sword suddenly surging. A vast and mighty pressure descended. Several silver lightning bolts swam wildly on the long yuan sword and finally gathered at the tip of the sword. Break! The great ancestor bellowed. That ball of silver Tianlei power suddenly exploded. Bang! The terrifying force spread in all directions. Chu Luiwei's sword-wielding arm trembled violently. The web between her thumb and index finger was torn. Blood flowed out. Just as her arm was completely numb, the darkness in front of her finally broke. Crack! A bright ray of light shone into the room. A powerful force came from behind and pushed Chu Luiwei forward. Chu Luiwei only felt that the light in front of her was dazzling. Then her body suddenly fell. Thousands of miles away. Rong Xiu had been busy dealing with the matters of several tribes recently. He had not slept for a few days and nights. Today, he finally had some time to lie down and rest. But not long after, he frowned in his sleep. Then he suddenly opened his eyes. He sat up, one hand on the edge of the bed, and the other hand gently rubbed between his eyebrows. His white inner shirt was loose, revealing his collarbone and a small part of his chest. The moonlight shone through the window and shone on his body. Every inch of skin that was unintentionally exposed was like white jade. The moonlight was like water, making his face look even more noble. He was like a flower on a snowy mountain, unreachable, cold, and calm. After a moment of silence, he lifted the blanket, grabbed the clothes beside him, and draped them over his body. Yan Qing, who was guarding outside the door, seemed to have heard the commotion in the hall. "Your Highness? You're awake? Come in." Hearing this, Yan Qing quickly pushed the door open and walked in. As soon as he entered the room, Yan Qing saw that his master not only got up, but also changed his clothes. Moreover, his face seemed to be a little strange. Yan Qing was shocked. He quickly stepped forward and asked carefully, "Your Highness, what's wrong with you?" Rong Xiu's gaze was calm, but it was frighteningly deep. "Go and get the Pantheon record." A trace of surprise flashed in Yan Qing's eyes, but he still immediately said, "Yes. I'll go and get it now. But there are a total of 10 volumes of the Pantheon record. Which volume do you want to read?" Rong Xiu thought for a moment and said lightly, "The 10th volume." Yan Qing was stunned for a moment and asked, "You mean the volume of the 3,000 years of the Xian Yuan calendar? Didn't your Highness read that volume before?" Rong Xiu nodded gently and immediately said, "And the 9th volume." If he guessed correctly, the name of the person in the North Sea seemed to be recorded in the 9th volume. Digression 6:00. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 977. Yan Qing didn't know why His Highness suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and wanted to read the Pantheon record. After all, the number of times His Highness had opened it for so many years could be counted on one hand. And every time, it was a time when something important was about to happen. Could it be that something had happened? The 10th volume. The only thing Yan Qing could think of was that it had something to do with that person. As for the 9th volume, he couldn't think of a reason at all. But of course, he didn't dare to ask these questions. After responding, he bowed and left. After Yan Qing left, the hall fell into silence again. Rong Xiu gently closed his eyes. The moonlight that was as cool as water enveloped his entire body. Under his long eyelashes, a faint shadow was cast. At this time, she should be at the ancient Phoenix Mountain. He wasn't worried about how dangerous it would be. After all, with her strength and trump cards, she should be able to deal with it. But after all, it was a special place. He didn't know if that person in the northern underworld had left something behind when he broke through at the ancient Phoenix Mountain. What if, after a moment, Rong Xiu opened his eyes? The Black Pyramid was as calm as usual, as if there were no waves. This made him feel a little relieved. But for some reason, he felt inexplicably uneasy. It was as if something had gone out of control. If it was something else, it would be fine, but he always felt that it seemed to be related to her. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door, and Rong Xiu raised his eyes slightly. The door opened, and Yen Qing returned. But this time, he was holding a bronze plate in his hand. On the plate, there were 2 rolls of bamboo slips, emitting a faint glow around them. And these were the 9th and 10th volumes of the Pantheon record. Your Highness. Yen Qing respectfully handed over the 2 rolls. Rong Xiu raised his white fingers, and the 2 rolls of bamboo slips silently flew in front of him, floating quietly in the air. He took one of the bamboo slips. Every bamboo slip on it was engraved with neat golden handwriting. However, the last one was completely blank. No, to be precise, there was actually handwriting on it. But for some reason, the handwriting was so worn that it was almost impossible to read. It was as if someone had forcefully erased it. Now, only fragmented traces of stars were left, flickering with a faint golden light. It was like a few stars that occasionally appeared in the dark night. Rong Xiu stared at the few golden light spots, his eyes deepened, and sighed softly. Sure, she had actually reached this step. It was much faster than he had expected. But then again, she was no ordinary person to begin with. Even if she were to start all over again, she would still be far superior to ordinary people in all aspects. But Rong Xiu leaned against the chair and rubbed his temples with a slight headache. Yen Qing asked worriedly, Your Highness, are you okay? Rong Xiu shook his head, took one last look, and closed the 10th scroll. Of Tuzes, to be. It was just that there was a small problem. Rong Xiu said. His thin scarlet lips were slightly raised. His tone was helpless, with a trace of imperceptible doting. The next time we meet, I'm afraid it won't be so easy. Prepare 2 more quilts for I. Yen Qing was confused. Huh? You're using the new one. His Highness is noble. His food, clothing, and other necessities are all the best. Why does he suddenly want a quilt? It's not for now. Rong Xiu waved his hand and coughed. It's better to be prepared. Yen Qing was a little confused. His Highness meant to keep it for future use? But no matter where he went, His Highness would definitely choose a comfortable place to sleep. If he was not satisfied, he would not sleep at all. He had never needed to prepare a quilt for himself. Yes, I will do it as soon as possible. Yen Qing was confused, but his intuition, which had been trained by his master's side for many years, told him not to ask. It would not end well if he asked. Then, Rong Xiu opened the remaining scroll. After reading for a while, he saw a few familiar words. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and a cluster of golden flames suddenly burned on his fingertips. Yen Qing was shocked. Your Highness! What was His Highness planning to do? It should be known that the Pantheon record could not be destroyed. Rong Xiu moved his fingertips, and a small golden spark fell on one of the bamboo slips. Like a drop of water falling into the sea, it did not cause the slightest ripple. However, such a simple action consumed a lot of Rong Xiu's energy. When his finger fell, fine beads of sweat had already appeared on his forehead, and his lips were faintly pale. Yen Qing knelt on one knee. Although he did not see it clearly, he could roughly guess what he was doing. He could not help but be very worried. But His Highness insisted, and he knew that it was useless to persuade him. He could only frown and sigh secretly. After doing all this, Rong Xiu closed the scroll and put it back on the bronze plate. Send it back. After Yen Qing left, only Rong Xiu was left in the hall. He sat quietly for a while before standing up. But at this time, he was not sleepy at all. After taking 2 steps, a huge white figure suddenly appeared. It was Xue Xue. It seemed to have felt something, and a trace of awe flashed in its eyes. Then it walked to Rong Xiu, prostrated on the ground, and wagged its tail, very obediently acting coquettishly. Rong Xiu touched its head. It's been some time since you came back from the Red Moon Desert, right? Xue Xue's body suddenly stiffened. A rare trace of gentleness appeared on Rong Xiu's face. The seniors must miss you very much. How about we go again? Ancient Phoenix Mountain. Outside the barrier. Time passed day by day, and in the blink of an eye, everyone had been in there for 14 days. There was only one day left until the last day of 3 elements as one. Everyone was on high alert. The closer they got to the node, the more nervous they became. The many powerhouses who were responsible for guarding the entrance and exit outside the barrier could clearly feel the surge of energy in Ancient Phoenix Mountain, which caused an obvious change in the power of the barrier. Because of this, they became more and more focused, afraid that the slightest mistake would occur. The emperors of the 4 empires were all waiting at this time. However, the expressions of these people were greatly different. Jun Qiji's expression was calm, but there was a faint trace of anticipation in his eyes. Ning Yuan was as still as a mountain. Gong Sunshao was a little nervous and anxious, and would look at the barrier from time to time. As for Tantai, he sat in his seat, and his face was extremely gloomy. His eyes were bloodshot, and his whole body was surrounded by a gloomy atmosphere. He had been staring at the colorful barrier, and there was deep hatred between his brows. Since a few days ago, he had suddenly become like this. In fact, everyone could roughly guess that something had happened to the people of Taiyu dynasty inside for him to be like this. However, the time was not up and the barrier was not open, so everyone could only wait. At this moment, the sky suddenly darkened. Dark clouds gathered, and the wind howled. Gong Sunshao could not help but point to the main peak of Ancient Phoenix Mountain. 3 elements as one is about to descend. Digression. Question. What did Rong Xiu want for the 2 quilts? The correct answer in the comments section will be rewarded with Xiaoxiang coins. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 978. Even though the colorful barrier covered the entire mountain range, everyone could still see the outlines of the mountains from the outside. For example, at this moment, when everyone looked up, they could see that the dark clouds in the sky were all converging towards the highest peak. Something big must have happened if there was a natural phenomenon. If it wasn't 3 essences as one, what could it be? Tantaichin also raised his eyes and looked over suddenly. He slowly clenched his fists, the veins on his forehead bulging, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Finally, it was at this moment. When this matter was over and those people came out of the barrier, he would definitely look for Shangguanyu and take back everything. At the same time, everyone in the barrier also noticed the commotion. In fact, most of them had already reached the bottom of the main peak. If they wanted to receive the endless force of 3 essences as one, they had to climb to the top of the main peak and stand at the highest point. Therefore, almost everyone had been heading this way for the past few days. Seeing the natural phenomenon, everyone couldn't suppress the excitement in their hearts and started to climb up. The commotion naturally attracted the attention of Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming, who were waiting at the top of the canyon. It's almost the last day, and 3 essences as one is about to appear. Yuan Jinghong looked at the commotion at the top of the main peak in the distance and muttered in a low voice. He then looked down at the canyon below. But they haven't come out yet, what should we do? Wu Ming also had a worried look on his face. Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu had gone down together, saying that they wanted to bring Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou back. However, after the 2 of them went down, they sat cross-legged and didn't move at all. It had been a few days, but they still didn't show any signs of coming up. This was something that could not help but make people worried. If it weren't for the fact that the legendary 3-eyed eagle was still below, they would have already rushed over. I don't know what's wrong with this canyon. Why did they stop moving after going down? Yuan Jinghong frowned. He really couldn't figure it out. After a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and stood up suddenly. I can't wait any longer. It was fine if they couldn't make it in time for 3 essences as one, but what if they didn't come up when they were close to leaving? One had to know that the time left for them to get out was extremely short. If he was careless and delayed, wouldn't he be trapped here forever? When Wu Ming heard this, his expression turned solemn. He felt that what he said made a lot of sense. Although the two of them knew that Chu Luiyue had broken through the barrier to enter, they had always thought that she had done it with the help of many experts outside. How could he not panic at this moment? I didn't go down before because I was worried that I would become a burden to Her Majesty and the others. But now, I can't care about that anymore. Yuan Jinghong said and patted Wu Ming on the shoulder. Your injuries haven't healed yet, so wait here first. I'll take the lead and go down to take a look. As he spoke, he didn't wait for Wu Ming to refuse. He quickly ran forward and leaped. Wait, Wu Ming was shocked. He was about to stop him, but he failed to do so. However, at this moment, a red flame flew out from the side and quickly blocked Yuan Jinghong's path. Yuan Jinghong turned to look at Dumpling in surprise. What are you? Before he could finish, Dumpling flapped her wings. Yuan Jinghong was instantly enveloped by a powerful force and flew back to his original spot. His eyes lit up and he looked at Tuanzi blankly. Wu Ming thought for a moment. It doesn't seem to want us to go down. Dumpling glanced at the two of them. Why go down? It's already messy enough. All he had to do was to stay here and wait. As if understanding Dumpling's gaze, the two of them looked at each other, suppressed the uneasiness in their hearts, and continued to wait. No matter what, this red-tailed phoenix is Her Majesty's contracted magical beast. It should be able to sense something, right? I hope everything goes well for Her Majesty and the others. Wu Ming glanced at the main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain and said in a low voice. Waiting always seemed to be particularly unbearable. Seeing that the sky was gradually darkening, Chu Luiyue and the others still did not move. Wu Ming and Yuan Jinghong were anxious again. But seeing that Dumpling was still calm, they could only continue to wait. Yuan Jinghong glanced at the main peak from time to time. It was a little far from here, but he could still see the flat and smooth top of the mountain. Until now, no one had climbed up. However, it was obvious that those people must be climbing halfway up the mountain. It was just that because the forest was dense, they could not see clearly and did not know the situation of the competition at this time. The sky was dark, and even the figures in the valley seemed to be gradually blurred. Soon it was midnight. A bright moon hung high in the night sky, scattering its clear light over the entire mountain range. The mountains rose and fell, and the forest was dark, reflecting dark blue shadows. It was exceptionally quiet. There were only the occasional rustling of the wind blowing through the forest and the canyon. At this moment, there was a sudden movement in the sky. Whirlwind. The pressure was impressive. Yuan Jinghong and Yuan Jinghong looked back and saw a tall and vigorous figure. With a leap, he directly climbed up the main peak of ancient Phoenix Mountain. Under the moonlight, he waved his long sleeves, and his clothes fluttered. His movement technique was peerless. Jun Jiuqing. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes, stared for a while, and said with certainty. After Yuan Jinghong was shocked, he quickly accepted this matter. He shrugged. It's not normal if it's not him. This ancient Phoenix Mountain was the territory of the Baiming dynasty, and he was Prince Baiming. The blood of the royal family flowed in his body. Wasn't it natural for him to be first? Wu Ming nodded and said, although that's the case, it's still very enviable to be able to climb up the mountain. Even if you're not first and can't obtain the endless force of 3 elements as one, you can still bathe in divine power. This is undoubtedly a rare opportunity. Yuan Jinghong sighed. I don't have any thoughts about this now. I just hope that Her Majesty and the rest are fine and can return safely. Bang! The sound of an explosion suddenly came from within the canyon. The two of them were shocked and looked down nervously. They saw 2 figures leaping up from below. Bang bang bang. A series of explosions sounded. The seemingly tranquil space, because of the impact, exploded continuously. The originally messy energy started to stir violently. It's Mu Hongyu and Feng Qi. Yuan Jinghong's sharp eyes recognized the two of them and was surprised and delighted. Seeing the two of them coming up and getting closer to them, Dumpling suddenly flapped its wings and flew up. It went straight for the two of them. A crimson figure flashed by at lightning speed. Mu Hongyu and Jian Fengqi had already landed on Dumpling's back. The chaotic and terrifying energy was attacking crazily, wanting to drag Dumpling down as well. It waved its claws and flew up at the same time. Then, it landed on the cliff. Yuan Jinghong and Jian Fengqi immediately went forward, but before they could rejoice, their expressions changed drastically. This was because Mu Hongyu and Jian Fengqi were both covered in blood. What happened to the two of you? Mu Hongyu opened her mouth but spat out a mouthful of blood. Jian Fengqi's heart twitched violently as he instinctively hugged her tightly and quickly fed her a pill. He couldn't care about his own injuries and looked at the two of them. The space below is in chaos. Where's Shangguanyu? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 979. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming were stunned. Her Majesty is still in the canyon. She hasn't come up. Jian Fengqi followed the duo's gaze and vaguely saw two figures sitting cross-legged. He gritted his teeth. That's an illusion. What? Hearing this, the two of them were shocked. When they looked again, they saw the two figures exploding in the chaotic energy battle. It was indeed not them. How could this be? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming looked at each other. They had been guarding here for the past few days and saw them go down with their own eyes. Then, they sat down next to Jian Fengqi and Chang Wanzhou. In this period of time, no one moved at all. Why did they suddenly become illusions? Jian Fengqi frowned. There are several spaces down there that can easily cause hallucinations. The two of them should still be trapped down there. Everything was fine at first. Mu Hongyu wanted to take him and escape from that space. However, due to the pressure from several forces around them, they couldn't get out directly. Instead, they rushed into another space. After struggling for a few times, they finally reached a less chaotic place above. They even saw Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming waiting above the canyon. They were only a few steps away from successfully rushing up. However, at this moment, several spaces down there suddenly exploded one after another for some reason. The violent energy almost swallowed the two of them. Mu Hongyu barely managed to escape with Jian Fengqi after risking her life. However, along the way she suffered too many violent attacks from the space and was seriously injured. She had a faint yuan body and was naturally sensitive to space. She was already in such a state after escaping from that space. What about Chu Lue and Wu Ming? What should we do? Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming also realized the seriousness of the matter at this time. Their hearts were in their mouths. Wait, where's the legendary three-eyed eagle? Wu Ming suddenly shouted. The few of them looked over and sure enough, they discovered that there was nothing left in the canyon. That gigantic three-eyed eagle had also disappeared at this moment. At this time, the explosions below were much softer and soon disappeared completely. The canyon was a mess. Rocks were flying everywhere, and smoke and dust were everywhere. However, there was no one. What's that? Yuan Jinghong suddenly exclaimed. Above the empty ground, a silver energy vortex suddenly appeared. The silver vortex continued to expand, and the speed at which it spun became faster and faster. Just as their faces were filled with doubt and nervousness, a figure suddenly flew out from the vortex. It's Chang Wanzhou. Wu Ming saw that person's face. Due to the impact of the whirlpool's power, Chang Wanzhou flew straight towards a cliff after flying out. With such a strong impact, if not death, it would be fatal. At this moment, a red figure quickly flew out. It was Dumpling. It spread its wings and flew across the sky at lightning speed. The next moment, it appeared right in front of Chang Wanzhou and intercepted it. Before they could see what happened, they saw Dumpling flying back with Chang Wanzhou. Then, it flapped its wings and carefully put Chang Wanzhou down. Yuan Jinghong immediately went forward. Chang Wanzhou's eyes were tightly shut and his body was covered in blood. Fortunately, he was still breathing. He seems to have fainted. Yuan Jinghong turned around and looked at Jian Fengqi. Mu Hongyu tugged at Jian Fengqi's sleeve, indicating for him to put her down and check on Chang Wanzhou. Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment, then placed Mu Hongyu next to Dumpling. At the same time, he whispered to her, "Your injuries are more serious." Your external injuries are more serious. Don't move around, okay? Mu Hongyu nodded seriously, then smiled and waved her fist. Don't worry. I've suffered even more serious injuries before. Aren't I fine now? Last time, when she was on the brink of death, she inexplicably became a faint Yuan body. Jian Fengqi's face, which always had a flirtatious smile, was cold at this moment, and he just stared at her quietly. When he was not smiling, he always looked particularly solemn, and there was a trace of coercion that made people not dare to disobey him. Mu Hongyu suddenly felt very embarrassed and inexplicably guilty. She slowly withdrew her fist. She murmured. Jian Fengqi's expression eased a little. Looking at her embarrassed face, he wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with his sleeve. Halfway through, he met Mu Hongyu's confused and strange gaze. Only then did he realize what he was doing and suddenly froze. Then, he pretended as if nothing had happened and withdrew his hand. However, Mu Hongyu kept looking at him. Her almond-shaped eyes were so clean and pure that for the first time, Jian Fengqi felt ashamed. He looked away and frowned, as if he was a little disgusted. Your face is covered in blood, so ugly. After saying that, he hurriedly turned around and walked towards Changwonzhou. Mu Hongyu touched her face. She was not angry at Jian Fengqi's words. Instead, she felt a little strange. Or rather, he was a little strange. She did not know if it was an illusion, but why did she feel that Jian Fengqi always felt a little guilty when he faced her? Jian Fengqi did not dare to turn around to look at Mu Hongyu. He walked over and took Changwonzhou's pulse. He frowned. How's the situation? Yuan Jinghong asked carefully. The force in his body has been exhausted, and his internal injuries are very serious. As soon as he said that, everyone present started to worry. Then, they heard Jian Fengqi continue. However, that his body is very special, as if there's a force gradually surging out. Jian Fengqi did not elaborate. He could feel that there was a shocking chill in Changwonzhou's body. This chill seemed to have frozen most of the power in his body. Jian Fengqi could vaguely sense that the power in his body was suppressed by a seal. At this moment, his internal injuries had also shaken this part. If he guessed correctly, this would increase the power in Changwonzhou's body rapidly. Jian Fengqi took out 2 pills and gave them to him. These 2 pills can temporarily stabilize his internal situation. As for the rest, we'll see. Wu Ming asked. So, he's not in much danger for the time being? Jian Fengqi hesitated for a moment and nodded. As long as the seal in his body was not completely removed, he should be safe. Hearing his words, the people around him relaxed a little. Changwonzhou is out, but where's His Majesty? Yuan Jinghong looked down and saw that the vortex was gradually dissipating. Soon, everything below calmed down. And Chu Lue was nowhere to be seen. Screech. At this moment, Dumpling let out a clear cry, bent down, and lowered its wings. Wu Ming was stunned for a moment and asked uncertainly, Is it telling us to go up? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 980. That arrow was a dazzling color, and it was extremely beautiful. Even in this dazzling golden sky, it was still very eye-catching. It appeared very suddenly, and its target was very clear, Chu Lue. Everywhere it passed, the golden force retreated, the space shattered, and the wind howled. The arrow seemed to have entered an unstoppable realm amidst the astonishingly vast sea of golden origin power. It was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it was already above Chu Lue's head. It was about to pierce through her skull. Seeing this arrow, Jun Jiuqing immediately frowned. That was clearly formed by the divine power left behind by Taizu. Why did it suddenly appear now and go straight for her? And it was obvious that it wanted to take her life. At this moment, Chu Lue looked up. The power of that arrow was extremely strong, and before it reached her, she already felt a faint stinging pain between her eyebrows. It wasn't hard to imagine that if this arrow really pierced her, her life would most likely end here. Unfortunately, she was not so easy to bully. Buzz. With a thought, the long yuan sword flew up instantly. It went head-on against that arrow. Slash, an ear-piercing scraping sound was heard, and that arrow quickly scraped past the long yuan sword, causing a string of sparks. After all, the long yuan sword was a divine weapon, and it still slowed down its speed. However, this arrow contained the remnant consciousness of that person. It was extremely cunning. Seeing that it was more troublesome to go head-on against the long yuan sword, it immediately changed its direction and planned to come from another direction. The long yuan sword chased after it. After all, Taizu's soul was also stored in the long yuan sword, and Chu Luiwei could not split herself, so Taizu controlled the long yuan sword to stop it. The two of them were entangled. They were entangled in a fight. The intense fight caused the golden force around Chu Luiwei to decrease, and the whole place was in chaos. Soon, Chu Luiwei discovered something strange. Although that arrow had been trying to attack her from all directions, it had never tried to attack from the side of the black shield. It seemed to be deliberately avoiding it. Not sure if it was an illusion, but Chu Luiwei faintly felt that it seemed to have a trace of reverence towards this black shield. However, the black shield could not completely protect her. After all, she still had to divert a part of her attention to devouring the surrounding force. This could not go on. When all the golden force surged towards Jun Jiuqing, there would be no turning back. A thought flashed across Chu Luiwei's mind, and she seemed to have thought of something as determination flashed across her eyes. Taizu, please help me hold on for a while more, she said in her heart. The great ancestor felt a little uneasy. Girl, what are you trying to do? Chu Luiwei sighed. Now that she was at the mercy of others, what else could she do? Naturally, it was to flip the chopping board. At this time, the other people who were watching nervously also noticed that arrow. That arrow was extremely powerful, so it was not difficult for them to guess that it was the divine power left behind by Taizu of the Dark North Kingdom. Qing Dai let out a long sigh of relief. It seems that even Taizu does not like her. An outsider from the Tianling dynasty dared to try and steal the power left behind by Taizu of the Dark North Kingdom? Wasn't she looking for trouble? Previously, she was worried that the Crown Prince would be merciful to her, but now that Taizu's divine power had personally appeared, there was nothing to worry about. Young Master Jian, half of Chang Wanzhou's body is covered in ice. What should we do? In such an urgent situation, Wu Ming was originally worried about Chu Luiwei, but when he glanced at Chang Wanzhou from the corner of his eyes, it seemed that the situation had become worse, and he could not help but ask. Jian Fengqi glanced sideways, frowned, and shook his head. The seal and the suppressed power in his body are extremely powerful, and I can't do anything about it. Now, it's up to him to see if he can make it through. Wu Ming wanted to say something, but he hesitated. He knew that Jian Fengqi was telling the truth, so he glanced at Chang Wanzhou and could only sigh helplessly. Almost all of the power is rushing toward Jun Jiuqing. Mu Hongyu nervously clutched her sleeves. When all of the power was sucked away from Chu Luiwei, then, she would be completely eliminated. It seems that Shangguan must have done something outrageous in the ancient Phoenix Mountain to cause such a disaster. Outside the barrier, everyone was closely watching everything that was happening on the main peak. Tan Taichen said in a gloomy voice. He deliberately glanced at Jun Qiji, hinting at something. Otherwise, why would he attract the attack of the Dark North Taizu's divine power? Jun Qiji frowned slightly and did not say anything. Not long after Tan Taichen entered Shangguan, he seemed to have changed into a different person. He kept talking about things related to Shangguan. It was easy to guess that something had happened to the people from the Taiyu dynasty, and he was certain that Shangguan and the others were behind it. Even the words that he was saying now did not conceal his disgust and hostility towards Shangguan. If it were any other time, Jun Qiji would not have cared too much. However, after seeing that arrow, he could not help but think more about it. However, the truth was not clear yet, so he could not make any conclusions. He only said, "It's human nature to want to become stronger. However, it seems that we still have to know our limits." Before he could finish, his expression changed drastically, and he stood up abruptly. At the top of the main peak, the golden origin power that had been snatched away earlier suddenly rushed toward Chu Luiwei. Even the origin power that originally belonged to Jun Jiuqing changed direction and rushed into Chu Liuyue's body. In the sky, thick layers of dark clouds suddenly surged. She's going to break through at this time? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 981. Everyone was dead silent. Wu Ming coughed and winked at him. Let's find a place to heal first. Only then did Yuan Jinghong notice the complicated gazes around him. He felt a chill down his spine and quickly nodded. Okay. The mountaintop was smooth and clean, and it was very spacious. There was still room for the few of them. However, as they moved, they still attracted a lot of attention. The surroundings became quieter, and only the sound of their footsteps was particularly clear. This was a little awkward. Mu Hongyu couldn't help but whisper to Jian Fengqi, who was next to her. Why do they keep looking at us? Jian Fengqi helped her apply medicine on her arm and said indifferently without raising his head, anyone who takes a shortcut during a competition will be looked at like this. Moreover, they weren't just taking a shortcut, they were directly at the end. It was obvious that these people had gone through a lot of hardships to reach the main peak. How could they not be angry when they saw them arrive so easily? Mu Hongyu nodded in understanding and obediently shut her mouth. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming carried Chang Wanzhou over. Dumpling followed closely behind. The five of them gathered together, and the Tianling dynasty instantly became the family with the most people on this mountain peak. Gong Sunyu's face was a little ugly. He had just finished speaking, and these people came in the blink of an eye. Moreover, all five of them had come. Even the Baiming dynasty couldn't do this. They just relied on a divine beast and did it so easily. It was simply infuriating to compare oneself to others. He couldn't help but yell at them angrily. Everyone came here based on their own abilities. Don't you think it's too much to be so opportunistic? Jian Fengqi couldn't be bothered to respond. He was still carefully treating Mu Hongyu's wound. Yuan Jinghong couldn't bear to listen to such words. He crossed his arms and chuckled. Opportunistic? This divine beast is ours, so why can't we use it? Besides, they didn't seem to have said anything about it, right? If you're not convinced, why don't you summon your own mythological beast? Gong Sunyu choked. A young man behind him retorted. But isn't this mythical beast from Shangguanyu? What does it have to do with you? Relying on a divine beast that was secretly brought in to ascend the main peak. His words were filled with undisguised disdain. Yuan Jinghong said coldly, "We didn't sneak this mythological beast in. It originally belonged to His Majesty. Also, watch your words. How can you call the name of Tianling Emperor Yuan Shi directly?" Hearing that Yuan Jinghong had used her status to suppress him, the man was a little timid, but he quickly suppressed it. Since you admit that it's hers, then how did it appear here if you didn't secretly bring it in? Because His Majesty is here as well. Yuan Jinghong chuckled. Everyone was stunned. Impossible. 5 of you have already come in. How can she be here? Gong Sunyu said with a frown. His Majesty has already come in a few days ago. It's been 9 days. Why don't you know anything about it? Yuan Jinghong glanced at him. If you don't believe me, you can ask these people from the Baiming dynasty. At that time, they all saw it clearly. Hearing his confident tone, Gong Sunyu and the others suddenly felt a little guilty. They quickly looked at Jun Jiuqing. Jun Jiuqing said lazily, "I thought that she would arrive earlier, but now. It seems that I overestimated her." He admitted it. Gong Sunyu and the others felt even more embarrassed, but at the same time, more questions arose in their minds. How can Shangguanyu enter in the middle of the time? How did she do it? It seems that she's the only one who came in. Why didn't the others stop her or send people in together? There were too many questions, but there was no point in asking them now. They're already at the top of the mountain. Are we going to chase them down? Even though these people were more or less injured, the red-tailed phoenix next to them was not to be trifled with. When the 2 men standing behind him saw this, they quickly went up to him and tried to appease him. "Young prince, there's nothing for us to worry about. Even if they're here, they're all defeated now. They're not worth mentioning at all." "That's right. Other than them, who didn't rely on their own abilities to come up here. When 3 essences as one above descends, they'll be in a sorry state. Gong Sun Yu was already unhappy, so he felt a little better after hearing those words. That's true. It's better to focus on 3 essences as one above first. As for the rest, we'll have to rely on our own strength. The people from the Tianling dynasty did not take this small argument to heart. This was because, while they were busy recuperating, they were also anxiously waiting for Chu Liyue's arrival. Since the red-tailed phoenix had sent them here, then she should be here too, right? Looking at the sky, the colorful light gradually revealed its outline. The few of them understood that they didn't have much time left. However, looking around, there was still no sign of Chu Liyue. Time passed slowly. Mu Hongyu's injuries had basically been treated. Although she was seriously injured earlier, fortunately, Jian Fengqi was there to treat her in time. In addition, her own recovery ability was also very strong, so she quickly got out of danger and stabilized her injuries. Jian Fengqi, on the other hand, had the help of Mu Hongyu, so when he escaped from that terrifying space, his injuries were not as serious as Mu Hongyu's. He was almost fully recovered after a little rest. Yuan Jinghong and Wu Ming had also mostly recovered in the past few days. Therefore, at this time, overall among them, Chang Wanzhou's situation was the worst. He leaned against a rock, his head tilted, and his breath was weak. His soft golden hair almost covered his eyebrows. No one saw that a faintly discernible light was emerging between his eyebrows. At this time, there were 2 forces in his body that were crazily intertwining. On one side was the seal, and on the other side was the frozen yin energy. The last time in the Dahuang swamp, the seal had shown signs of loosening. Now that it had been hit by this violent force, it was severely damaged. Moreover, under the stimulation of the power of this space, the frozen power in his body seemed to want to break free from the shackles and completely rush out. Intense pain filled his body. Chang Wanzhou curled up and frowned in pain. The light between his eyebrows was even more obvious. Wu Ming noticed his abnormality and was about to go closer to take a look when a loud sound suddenly came from the sky. A bolt of lightning fell from the sky and struck the colorful ball of light. Boom, boom. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 982. At this moment, a ray of white light appeared on the horizon. The last day had arrived, and this day was the beginning of the descent of the 3 essences as one. When the Tianlei fell and struck the colorful ball of light, the vigorous force between heaven and earth began to surge out from the colorful ball of light. Whoosh! A red circle of light quickly spread out in all directions. In a split second, half of the sky was lit up. It was like a wave crashing onto the reef. It was also like a tidal wave that swept everything away. A vigorous and terrifying power surged forth. It's here! It was unknown who shouted this out. Everyone looked up and was on full alert. Boundless red origin power descended from the sky. The shocking pressure quickly pressed down. This terrifying power had not completely descended, but it had already caused a great deterrence to everyone. A man standing behind Gong Sun Yu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. He looked up, his face full of panic. It was said that the power of the 3 essences as one would descend in a few rounds. Only those who could completely withstand it could obtain the endless force. There was even the divine power left behind by Taizu of the northern underworld. He never dared to hope that he could be that person, but he also never thought that he could not even make it through the first round. At this moment, he was not the only one who was suffering. The vigorous red force spread out, and the entire sky seemed to have turned into a red sea. The dark clouds were suffused with red light, and the mountains and forests were howling above the rolling mountains. Streams of ferocious origin power swept over from all directions and surged into his body. Moreover, they were flowing wildly. The intense pain was almost unbearable. The man who spat out blood first could not take it anymore. His knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. Bang! The sound of kneecaps knocking on the mountain rocks was almost negligible in this earth-shattering commotion. Even Gong Sun Xiao had put away all his thoughts at this moment, and was doing his best to deal with everything in front of him. It was already very difficult to protect oneself, so who would care about others? The red force rolled down, and in an instant, more than half of the forest on the main peak was destroyed. Everywhere it passed, the trees were broken, and the mountain rocks collapsed. A cry of pain came from halfway up the mountain, reverberating through the undulating mountain range. It wasn't hard to tell from this voice that its owner was experiencing pain and suffering. Between heaven and earth, there was chaos. And this was just the beginning. When almost the entire sky was drowned by the red origin power, a black figure quickly flew over from afar. It was the legendary three-eyed eagle. A woman was standing on its back. She was dressed in a red dress, her clothes fluttering in the wind and her black hair fluttering in the wind. There were messy bloodstains on her face and body, but she didn't look like she was in a sorry state. Instead, she had a kind of intense fighting spirit that made people tremble in fear. Her eyes were fixed on the main peak not far away. The world was dark, and only the colorful ball of light was the most eye-catching existence. From here, one could clearly see that the entire void was filled with energy fluctuations. Without a doubt, these fluctuations were centered around the colorful ball of light. At first glance, it was as if all the energy in this world was surging with its breathing. Chu Luiwen narrowed her eyes dangerously, but the corners of her lips curled up into a smile. The thing that wanted to stop me earlier, was it? That's right. Within the colorful ball of light, there is a divine power stored, and very obviously, it also has a trace of the northern underworld Taizu's consciousness from back then. It probably sensed that you were a threat to it first, and that's why it was so hostile towards you. Taizu's voice came into her ears. From the moment you split open the barrier, it should have sensed something, and that's why there was a series of troubles after that. Chu Luiwe laughed softly. Looks like it really thinks highly of me. Then wouldn't it be inappropriate if I don't give it a gift in return? Previously, she wasn't interested in the three essences as one. She only wanted to save Mu Hongyu and the others after entering and ensure their safety. She didn't expect that before she even made a move, the other party had already set its sights on her and even tried to trap her in that chaotic space. She had always followed a principle. If others didn't offend her, she wouldn't offend them. If others offended her, she would eliminate them completely. Taizu pondered for a moment. Are you really going to snatch that divine power of yours? You have to know that with your current strength, if you want to defeat those people and withstand the pressure of this divine power, it's not that easy. Just Jun Jiuqing alone was already very difficult to deal with. He was Prince Baiming. How could he allow others to snatch the divine power left behind by Taizu? Swoosh! A black light flashed in Chu Liyue's hand. The long yuan sword was in her hand. Whether I can snatch it or not, we'll only know after I snatch it. With that, she leaped. She quickly landed at the foot of the main peak. The legendary three-eyed eagle's figure instantly disappeared in midair and returned to Chu Liyue's body. Chu Liyue looked up and began to climb. Chu Liyue was the last to reach the main peak. Without a doubt, she chose to climb the mountain at this moment because it would be several times more difficult than the others. After all, when the others climbed the mountain earlier, they didn't have the forceful force and pressure of three elements as one-to-one to stop them. At this moment, that terrifying force enveloped the entire main peak. Every step was extremely difficult. Fortunately, Chu Liyue's injuries weren't serious. Moreover, she had the pure gold armor and the long yuan sword. The path up wasn't that difficult. She walked up like this for a while. Not long after, she met a young man. At this moment, the young man was hurriedly running toward the foot of the mountain. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Chu Liyue. The two of them looked at each other. The young man hesitated for a moment, and then suddenly opened his eyes wide. You are... Chu Liyue recognized this face. It seemed to be from the Xian dynasty. She gently nodded her head in acknowledgement and continued to ascend. Hey, you're going up? The young man was a little confused and hurriedly asked. Chu Liyue raised her eyebrows. Wasn't it obvious? It's very dangerous up there. The young man waved his hand, and there was still some lingering fear in his expression. "You'd better hurry up and go down with me." "Chu Liwei," she smiled. "Thank you, but there's no need." Seeing that she didn't listen to his advice, the young man became more and more anxious. "Aya, you just came up from below, so you don't know. The closer you get to the top of the mountain, the heavier the pressure you'll suffer. And the more dangerous it is. Don't take it lightly." At this moment, a second tunlei came down from the surging dark clouds in the sky. Rumble. The colorful light ball shone brightly. Then, endless orange force surged out. Like a cliff collapsing, it flowed out rapidly. Soon, that terrifying force surged to where the two of them were. "I told you it's dangerous," the young man said anxiously, but before he could finish his sentence, he stopped abruptly. That was because the origin power had stopped just one step away from the woman. Digression. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation at around 6:30 p.m., a better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 983. She stood there quietly and did nothing. But the power and pressure that seemed terrifying to others didn't seem to pose any threat to her. Vaguely, one could only see streaks of golden light surging around her body. Chu Liwei was actually slightly shocked. Because only at this moment did she realize that the pure gold sacred armor seemed to be even stronger than before. This was too strange. After all, it wasn't the first time she used the pure gold armor, but there had never been such a sign before. It was very strong enough to allow her to escape unscathed after fighting with 3 rank 8 warriors alone. But it didn't seem to be to such an extent. Chu Liwei suppressed this doubt and raised her hand. A streak of orange force flew over and entered her body silently. Although this force was a little dangerous, it still contained extremely strong power. It was a pity to be completely isolated. What should be used should still be used, right? Seeing Chu Liwei's series of actions, the young man was dumbfounded. What was she doing? Others couldn't wait to avoid it, but she was actually so interested and even took the initiative to guide that force into her body? At this moment, a pressure rapidly approached from above. He was careless and didn't notice this danger in time. By the time he realized that something was wrong, the orange force had already caught up to his face. It was about to completely crush him. A black light flashed quickly and blocked this terrifying force. In an instant, the orange light scattered in all directions. This place will become even more dangerous later. It's safer for you to leave as soon as possible. Chu Liwei kept the long yuan sword and left after saying that. She lifted her leg and went up. The young man looked at her figure in a daze for a while before shouting, "Thank you." Chu Liwei's figure was already far away. He pursed his lips and finally continued to walk to the foot of the mountain. When Chu Liwei was halfway up the mountain, she had already received 3 waves of force. Just as he had expected, the higher he went, the stronger the pressure he had to endure, and the more dangerous the situation he was in. However, not only did her speed not slow down, but it also gradually increased. Because the feeling of devouring the force seemed to be quite good, Chu Liwei continued to absorb the surrounding force as she walked up. After all, it was an existence that contained divine power. The force that surged out of the colorful light was much purer than the ordinary force outside. Chu Liwei faintly felt that she had touched that invisible barrier again, rank 7 warrior. When the power of the 3 essences as one poured down, she might be able to break through. As Chu Liwei continued to walk up, she would occasionally hear a few screams. It was likely that those who had tried to climb the mountain before were unable to withstand the power, which was why it was like this. By the time she was 2/3 of the way there, the 5th wave had already appeared. This time, 2 figures flew down from the top of the mountain. Of course, it was obvious that he had been eliminated. Chu Liwei looked from afar and found their figures familiar. They seemed to be from the Baiming dynasty and the Xian dynasty. She looked up and raised her eyebrows slightly. Jian Fengqi and the others had actually persevered until now. Boom! The 7th tunlei fell and struck the ball of light. At this moment, it was no longer the colorful ball of light at the beginning. There were only 3 colors left. And this Tianlei strike set off a terrifying energy tide once again. This time, the energy was a demonic purple. It fell from the sky and swept away. At this moment, the main peak, along with the surrounding peaks, had almost all become bare. Cracks could be seen everywhere on the mountain. It was a mess. However, only the top of the main peak was still as smooth as before. At that moment, there were only a few people left on the platform. Gongsun Yu was the only one left in the Xian dynasty. The slightly plump man was the only one left in the East Com dynasty. Even the Baiming dynasty was only left with Jun Jiuqing and Qing Dai. But, other than that, the 5 people from the Tianling dynasty were still here. Although they were not in good condition, they were still here in one piece. Of course, Dumpling contributed to this, but it was also because of their concerted efforts. Mu Hongyu had a faint essence body and could temporarily freeze the surrounding space. Just this point alone allowed them to avoid the most powerful attacks. This was why none of them had been eliminated until now. The colorful lights around them flickered. Chang Wanzhou leaned to the side and did not move. Only the pattern between his eyebrows became brighter. The 7th force spread out. At this moment, only silver and gold were left on the ball of light. And the outline inside gradually became clear. It seemed to be a flower. Unfortunately, at this moment, they could not see what it was from the outside. Jun Jiuqing stared at the ball of light, keeping a secret. Boom! The 8th force. In an instant, silver light illuminated the world. Chu Liwei seemed to have sensed something and looked up. In midair, the ball of golden light burned fiercely like a flame. An unparalleled pressure was oppressive. The golden light flowed, and one could vaguely see that there seemed to be a flower budding inside. Chu Liu's heart skipped a beat. For some reason, a strong sense of familiarity suddenly arose in the depths of her heart. She subconsciously gripped the long yuan sword tightly, jumped up, and went straight to the top of the mountain. At this moment, the light flickered, and she finally saw what was inside. It was actually a peach blossom. Digression. Oh, I forgot to tell you that the answer was to sleep on the floor. February, I wanted to let you sleep in the room, but they all said that you were kicked out. Rongxiu? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 984. At the same time, Jun Jiuqing also saw this scene. His blood-red eyes flashed with a touch of impatience and killing intent. You're really haunting me. How annoying. His thin lips curled into a smile, but the corners of his eyes were very cold. His hoarse and deep voice sounded a little gloomy at this moment. Qing Dai, who was standing behind him, could not help but look up when she heard this. Unfortunately, the golden ball of light was shining brightly, and she could not see what was inside. She quickly glanced at Jun Jiuqing from the corner of her eyes, and she was a little curious. His Highness the Crown Prince seemed to be temperamental, but in fact, he was very cold and indifferent most of the time. There were very few things that could catch his eye, let alone affect his mood. But just now, he seemed to have seen something in the ball of light, and the aura around him suddenly became cold and gloomy. This kind of situation was really rare. Moreover, His Highness had already inherited most of the power of 3 elements as one. He was only one step away from successfully inheriting the endless force. What was there to be annoyed about? However, before she could think clearly, an extremely dangerous aura suddenly attacked her from all directions. Silver origin power roiled wildly under the dark sky like an unceasing torrent of a river. In front of this power, the people on the top of the mountain were very small. When the silver force fell from the sky, it was like a huge wave washing away the sand. 2. Qing Dai had just opened her mouth when her body was swept away uncontrollably. She almost subconsciously wanted to circulate the force in her body to reduce this part of the power, but it was impossible. Her little bit of power was so insignificant at this time. The terrifying power intertwined and squeezed, and it almost made her internal organs burst. Then her vision turned black, and her body was instantly thrown away. Bang! Qing Dai crashed heavily into a mountain beside her. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and her body kept falling. In the end, she fell on a protruding rock, and a few of her bones were broken. She wanted to support her body to stand up, but it was futile. She could only rely on her right arm, which was the only one that was still intact, to stand up. Ignoring the injuries on her body, she immediately raised her head to look at the main peak. At this moment, the sky above ancient Phoenix Mountain had already been completely covered by rolling dark clouds. Between heaven and earth, there was only darkness. A golden ball of light floated in the air, shining so brightly that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Its entire body was exuding a sacred and powerful aura. It made people unconsciously revere him. Below the golden ball of light was a ring-shaped silver sea that completely enveloped the main peak. The various colors of origin power that had appeared before all appeared dim and lifeless under the illumination of the silver light. From afar, the tiny specks of color were nothing more than the edges of the huge ring-shaped silver sea. They were not worth mentioning. Similarly, the power that erupted this time was several times greater than before. Qing Dai looked at it nervously, as if she was searching for something. Soon, she saw a tall figure leaping out from the silver sea. Evil, flamboyant, demonic. Yet, he was incomparably powerful. Qing Dai's heart finally settled down. "I'm all right, cough cough." She closed her eyes and rejoiced. Although the blood between her lips and teeth stimulated her to keep coughing, as long as she saw that he could succeed, everything else didn't matter. When the 8th Tunlei came down, the three essences as one erupted with unprecedented power. On that mountaintop, the only one who could persist and stay should be His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Thinking of this, Qing Dai's eyes were filled with admiration and admiration. As if to confirm her guess, a few more figures were kicked out by the violent force one after another. She took a look and saw that they were the two people from the East Kam dynasty and the Xian dynasty. After that, another red figure was flung out from the silver sea. Red-tailed phoenix. In the midst of the chaos, it flapped its wings and hurriedly stabilized its body. Upon closer inspection, it seemed to be carrying a few people with its claws. Those were obviously the people from the Tianling dynasty. Qing Dai had always felt a little uncomfortable with their appearance. When she saw this scene, her mood immediately became much better. Even the injuries on her body were not so serious. As such, only His Highness the Crown Prince was left on the mountaintop. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, a sharp whistling sound broke through the air. After that, a slender and tall figure actually leaped up from below. The sword aura was awe-inspiring. It broke through the silver sea. Qing Dai's eyes suddenly widened. After breaking through the layers of force, Chu Luiyue felt as if a mountain was on her shoulders. It was incomparably heavy. However, the moment she broke through everything and leaped into the air, the heavy pressure instantly disappeared. Above her head, golden light was shining, and under her feet, silver waves were sparkling. In all directions, there was an incomparably pure and majestic power. Everything was fine except for Jun Jiuqing, who was not far away. Sensing this movement, Jun Jiuqing looked over. There was no surprise on his handsome face that was almost devilishly handsome. Instead, he raised his sword-like eyebrows slightly and said slowly, "You're much slower than I expected." He originally thought that she would at most be a little slower than him, but he did not expect that she almost did not catch up. However, to be able to climb all the way up from the foot of the mountain under the condition of 3 elemental as one's prominence was not to be underestimated. Chu Luiyue glanced at him with an indifferent expression. "It's fine as long as you caught up. What's the matter if it's sooner or later?" Jun Jiuqing raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. "Your strength is not as strong as before, but your temperament is still the same." She had always been like this, overly arrogant. There were many arrogant people in this world, including Jun Jiuqing himself. He always disliked such people, but he always felt that she was a little different from others. Therefore, after seeing this many times, he felt a little interested. Chu Luiyue pretended that she did not hear anything. Jun Jiuqing knew her identity a long time ago, and he knew her even more than she knew herself. It would be fine if he could say something useful, but unfortunately he always said such specious and meaningless words. It was extremely boring. She looked up at the golden ball of light and went straight to the point. It seems that only one person can inherit the endless force of 3 elemental as one's prominence, as well as the divine power in it? Jun Jiuqing was not surprised. You want to compete with I? Chu Liuyue's lips curled up slightly. Although this originally belonged to Baiming Taizu, but, since we're already here, wouldn't it be a pity if we don't give it a try? You're no match for I. Jun Jiuqing was calm and composed. Even if he helps you, distant water can't put out a nearby fire. The result will be the same. Chu Liyue narrowed her eyes. However, if you want this thing, it's not impossible. Jun Jiuqing looked at her, his eyes deep and his thin lips slightly curled. His voice was low and hoarse, like a warm night breeze brushing past her ear. As long as I signs the marriage contract, all of this will be yours. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.